Hello and good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm Cheryl Leong from the Growth Hub, and welcome this evening to a special webinar, which we will be having a special guest called Pete Wargent. Pete Wargent is CEO, co-founder of Buyers Buyers. Pete is joining us all the way from the sunny UK, so I'm just going to bring him down here. Hi, Pete. How are you today? Welcome for joining.
I'm good, thanks. I'm not so sure about the sunny, but otherwise very well. But
I can see the light flooding through. So
it's a different state of affairs in Europe, so we can travel freely now to the Algarve or to the Mediterranean. So there is
don't rub
some
it in.
light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, hopefully I can get back into Australia fairly soon because, as we'll talk about today, exciting new business up and running, and obviously a lot easier to do from Australia than Europe.
Absolutely. And definitely from where you originally are from in Noosa, where there's a lot more freedoms around at the moment as compared to the other parts of Australia, which you can't even go dog walking without wearing a mask. So maybe just hold back coming back. Coming back too soon. But Pete, welcome to this special event, and I know we're going to be talking about how to generate highly qualified leads for buyers agents. So we deal with a lot of buyers agents, and we're seeing an ever growing demand for the services that buyers agents bring to the market. So tell us a little bit about your background. You're obviously not a stranger to the property and buyers agent world.
No, so I was originally my professional career was as a chartered accountant. I was a director at Deloitte. I went out on my own in 2011, so just about 10 years ago to the month, and I started up a buyer's agency. And originally we covered Sydney and London, so we had a London office and a Sydney office. So it was something a little bit different, different dynamics in those two markets. And at that time, it was actually quite difficult to get people to buy in Sydney. The market was in a bit of a downturn. Interest rates were a little bit higher than they are today, and it was actually quite hard work getting buyers across the line. And then around sort of mid 2012, suddenly the market bottomed out with a couple of interest rate cuts, and then things really took off. So, been running a buyer's agency myself for about 10 years now. We don't do so much in London these days for various reasons. The rules have changed on lending to non-residents, and also there's new tax implications for non-residents. So most of what we do these days is Sydney and particularly Brisbane. But yeah, I've had a decade of experience in the industry. It's a great job for people who like to be out of the office, and yeah, we've always been a boutique operation. It's just me and a couple of others, so we don't do particularly high volumes, but we've always enjoyed it, and it's always been successful. Only just in the last 2 years have I come into the idea of running another business to generate actual highly qualified leads for buyers agents, because it was a problem I could see and I'd had first-hand experience of, especially when I was starting out, pretty much door knocking and networking. And obviously, the dream situation for a buyer's agent is somebody bringing you a pre-approved lead with mortgage pre-approval.
Absolutely. And what have you noticed over the 10 years? Because, we've seen quite a shift from people, it would have been quite, I said, when you started, quite difficult, people not really understanding what buyers agents were or the need. And where did you sort of see that things start to shift?
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I started out in Sydney, there were a few buyers agents around. There was Chris Gray at Empire, Rich Harvey, a property buyer, and Metropole was active in Sydney. And there was a couple of uh, agents in like Tracy Chandler in the eastern suburbs. But I think one of the things that was really different was just the number of agents who were specialised in being buyers agents. It was much lower back then, and it was largely Sydney and Melbourne centric. It hadn't really caught on in other parts of the country. since that time, there's a lot more buyers agencies, and the awareness has grown a lot. So I think it's a gradual process. I think it really depends on where you go in the world. In some parts of America, most buyers will use a
Mm,
buying agent, but then you go to like for example, where I'm from in the UK, in London, people use buyers agents. You get out to the regions, it's just not the done thing. So I think in
mm.
Australia, it's becoming increasingly a sought after service. And I think particularly at the moment, because people are finding it hard to travel and inspect properties. But even still, it's only about 3% or so of transactions going through buyers agents. And we think that share can get much bigger over time.
And why do you think there's the greater demand for the services that buyers agents bring?
I think it's a few different reasons. I think if you went back, um, well, when interest rates were higher before 2007, there wasn't the same volume of investors in the market back then. So that's
Mm,
part of the reason. I think the old model used to be, you saved hard, you bought your first property, and maybe in 5 years' time you upgraded. It was very much a process that people did by themselves. I think the idea that people might rent their first property and build a property portfolio. That's an idea that's gained traction over time. Obviously, these days, cash in the bank as well doesn't really pay much. It's not like you can get 7 or 8% on a term deposit these days. So people are needing to find ways to put their capital to work, and um, investors very often use buyers agents because they don't
mm,
buy in their home patch. And I think there's a growing awareness as well that you don't need to invest just in your own backyard these days. Very often, particularly in Brisbane, we find a lot of our clients are based in Sydney or Melbourne, using their equity from their home or investment portfolio, and they want to buy interstate. So using a buyer's agent in that circumstance obviously makes perfect sense.
mm. And so I used to think that the services of a buyer's agent was sort of more for the people who were, wealthy, high net worths, doctors and lawyers. Has that typically been the case, and is there a, have you seen a shift now that it's more accessible to everyone?
Yes, to some degree. Yeah, I think it did used to be thought of as a kind of a luxury expense
Mm,
to some degree. And I mean, I think I think back to when I bought my first home in Bondi a few years ago now. I mean, it was so difficult to go through the process of saving up the deposit. The idea of,
mm,
spending even more dollars on a buyer's agent, it was quite, it's a
yeah.
difficult hurdle, particularly for people buying their first property. I think one of the things that we do differently at Buyers is that we actually offer two different products. There's the full end-to-end service, but there's also a negotiation and acquisition service. So if a
Mm,
client has
mm,
already identified the property they want to buy, we can also offer a simple due diligence service, which is obviously cheaper for the buyer. And the buyer's agent doesn't have to go out and do a full search in that situation. They can simply guide the buyer through the process and the negotiation. So that's another way in which we can grow the market, is actually where people have already identified what they want to
mm.
buy. They don't need to pay for the full service, which sometimes buyers find difficult to get their head wrapped around.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the problem that buyers solves.
Yeah, so I mean, originally, as I mentioned, I sort of just did my own thing. It was a couple of years ago. A guy that I'd worked with previously, called Doron Peleg from Riskwise Property Research. He came to me with this idea of building a national network of buyers agents. So a bit like, if you think in the mortgage broking space,
Mm,
we had AFG and then Aussie Home Loans and Mortgage Choice, and they've massively grown the market share of people that
mm,
use a mortgage broker. So Doran's idea was essentially to build a national panel of buyers agents. We would buy across all states and territories using that aggregator model. We get clients come to us. We make sure they've got mortgage pre-approval. We make sure we know where and what they want to buy. So we help them decide what to buy with their budget. And then
mm,
once we've got the client pre-approved and good to go, we then allocate them to the buyer's agent, who can just focus on essentially what they do best, which is finding and buying property, I think that was
Yeah.
one of the things I always found as a buyer's agent. I spent half of my time trying to find new clients instead of actually doing what
Yes.
I enjoy doing, which is buying property for clients. So we've currently got about 25 buyers agencies on the panel. So we go right across every state and every territory. And it's obviously a slightly different model. So we went to investors to raise capital to spend on marketing. This is all publicly available information, so I don't think I'm giving away too much. So we raised $2.5 million from a range of investors. Got a number of investors from the tech firm Atlassian, so they help us on the
Fantastic.
IT and the
Yep.
tech side of things. So we're quite a tech enabled business. And we essentially take care of everything. So we sign up the client, we do the invoicing, we do the collection. We've got market research tools and property strategy advice. And then we hand over the lead to the buyer's agent simply to execute on the purchase. And in terms of the fee model, it varies a little bit, but generally speaking, we pay 80% of the fee to the buyer's agent and we keep 20. I mean, that's essentially the business model. It does vary a little bit depending on the transaction. But that's essentially the model. We're just an aggregator, and we've got a national panel of buyers agents that buy right across the country.
And basically, it's a no win, no pay sort of model.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, as soon as we complete on a transaction, we invoice the clients, and then as soon as we collect, we pay the fee straight across to the buyer's agent. So it's we do like a lot of buyer's agents, we have an engagement fee and a success fee. Because there will always be some circumstances where somebody signs up and then for whatever reason circumstances change and then they don't go through with the purchase. So at least in that case, there is an engagement fee. But I'd say 95+% of the time, clients who've got a mortgage pre-approval will end up fulfilling on the transaction, and we get a success fee out of it, which is one of the benefits, of course, of using a buyer's agent. The success rate in buying tends to be much higher.
Absolutely. So talk us through, I guess, that qualification process, because that is for a lot of buyers agents is really time consuming. So, and I'd say most of the audience here, if you're a buyer's agent and you've got questions for Pete, please pop them in the comments below, and we'll endeavor to answer them. But share what what the pain points you're experiencing in your buyer's agency, and Pete can talk us through a little bit about, like I said, there's a lot obviously a bit of tech that goes into buyers, and there's stuff that's happening to be able to qualify the leads, which is a huge time savings. But tell us a little bit more about what else goes on behind what buyers does.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's possible. I'm going to try to share my screen here.
Yeah,
Let's see if
absolutely.
this works okay. And
We have tech support here on hand if we need.
We're tech enabled today. So let me see if here we go. We've got a screen share there. So can you see our website there? Okay.
Yeah, amazing. Yep.
So now we're just in the process of rebuilding our website. So this will change in due course. But so one of the things that we do when clients come to us with an inquiry, I mean, one of the first things we do is make sure that they've got mortgage pre-approval, because, or at least the capacity to buy, because if they don't have that, in the end, all the desire in the world is not going to help. So one of the first things we do is make sure that the buyers are pre-approved. We do, as we mentioned here, we do have a property strategy service. It's relatively cheap. It's a 10-year property plan to assist clients in working out essentially a property investment strategy. And so that's one of the things that we can do with clients. Quite often, buyers don't necessarily want to pay for a plan, in which case we do have a range of market research tools that can help them just to narrow down on where and what to buy. So we've got, and you can go to this website, buyersbuyers.com.au. This is all free for anybody who goes to the website. So there's a whole range here of market research tools in terms of working out what are the best properties to buy for the budget. We've got all kinds of market research tools in terms of the top suburbs to buy, where we see the market going. We've got a quarterly risks and opportunities report. There's also you can get free property valuations using our valuation tool, risk reports for any property. So there's a whole range of stuff that we can do with buyers before they've even engaged with a buyer's agent. We can really help them just to narrow down on, okay, have they got mortgage pre-approval? What's the budget? What's the strategy? And therefore, which are the suburbs and property types they should be considering? So at the point we hand over to the buyer's agent, the client should really have a very good idea of where and what they want to buy. And the buyer's agent doesn't need to spend hours of time sort of isolating the strategy, because we'll have already done that part. And I think it's, we've been active in the market for 10 years. So you do see a lot of the same situations coming up over and over again. So we've got a pretty good idea of what tends to work for investors. And home buyers is a slightly different situation, because people often have to be within certain school zones and so on. But yeah, there's a lot that we can do to streamline the process, so that when we do hand over the client to the buyer's agent, they know the brief is quite specific and they can just get started on day one.
Fantastic. So Luke's asked, what sort of things should we consider when using a buyer's agent?
Yeah, there's a range of different things. I mean, one of the things I would look for is years of experience. I think it's true that every buyer's agent needs to start somewhere, but ideally you don't want to be the first client going through the buyer's agent's learning journey. So I think you want the buyer's agent to have appropriate licensing, insurance, years of experience. Obviously, for a lot of clients, the fee will be a driving factor, because fees can range anywhere from 1% to 3% of a transaction. So those are probably the main things that people look for: credibility, experience, and a fee that's within an acceptable price range for the buyer.
Yeah, and I guess if you're looking at investment properties, you want to make sure that the buyer's agent has a healthy portfolio themselves.
Ideally, yes, and also if you're going to be buying an investment property, you'd probably want the buyer's agent to have a high level of familiarity with the area you're looking to buy in. I think there has been a bit of a trend over recent years for we get buyer's agents who are based in, I don't know, Sydney eastern suburbs, buying properties in goodness knows where, Tasmania or southeast Queensland. I mean, it can be done these days with market research and so on. But my experience, I think, of being a buyer's agent is that the best agents tend to have connections. They tend to be very familiar with local streets and local locations, and they tend to know the local agents, so they can often get first look at properties and buy pre-market or off-market. So I think, generally speaking, you want them to have a high level of familiarity within the suburbs or locations you're looking to buy in.
Yeah. And so how does the fee structure work if a client goes through buyers and noting that every buyer's agent has a different fee structure? Is it and so is it dependent on buyers sort of fee structure, or is it or do you work with that buyer's agent and say, okay, what's your fee structure and here's the client?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the balance of power is really sits with the buyer's agents, because in the end, they're not compelled to take any work that we refer to them. Generally speaking, though, we agree a fee with the buyer. So as I mentioned, we've got two different products really. We've got the full end-to-end service. So the fees we've charged for that, I mean, they've ranged anywhere from sort of 10 to 12k up to, I think the highest fee we've charged has been about 28,000 for a high value transaction in Sydney. We do also have a negotiated acquisition service, which is generally lands at about $7,000 plus GST. So with those, we agree the fee with the client, and then we take the pre-approved client to the buyer's agent. Now, obviously, in the current environment, a lot of buyer's agents are very busy, and sometimes they might not have the capacity to take on the work at a given fee level, which is one of the reasons we like to grow our panel of agents, so it gives us a few more choices. But I tried, being a buyer's agent myself, I tried to look at it from both sides of the fence, and
Mm,
I think over 10 years, I've had a lot of people refer clients to me, but the the quality of referral can range from, well, I know this guy in Sydney and he's thinking about doing something in property, which is obviously a low quality lead and probably
yeah,
won't go anywhere. But then at the top end of the quality, you've got somebody who's ready to buy today and they've got a mortgage pre-approval, and that's really what we're bringing to buyers agents. It's work that is guaranteed to start immediately. So for that reason, most of the work that we allocate, we find a buyer's agent relatively quickly because a lot of the work has already been done.
excellent. So we've got more questions coming through. Does buyers specialize in a particular type of property transaction, or do you consider all property types?
Yeah, we do consider all types. I think it would probably be fair to say that both Doron and I, as the co-founders, we do have a third co-founder, Phil Battles, who's also based in Gold Coast, coincidentally. We've been quite sort of vociferous in the media over the years about the dangers of buying new and off the plan property. So
Mm,
I'm not saying we would never do it, but I would generally say that unless you've got a reason to be buying brand new, and sometimes non-resident buyers have to buy new property and it's unavoidable, but we tend to prefer established property. There's a lot less that can go wrong. I think statistically, you'll see that investors lose money less often on established property as compared to buying brand new. Um, and I think, for investors, a lot of our market research tools are focused on finding the best performing locations and assets. And I think it's become clear over recent years that what you really need to focus on if you want to get a good result from a price growth point of view is scarcity value,
mm,
high land to value, high land to asset ratio. So properties with a high land value content, much less keen on buying high rise apartments or units in vast tower blocks because our stats have just shown over the years they just don't perform. There's no
mm.
scarcity, and you tend to pay a lot in strata fees, and there's just more that can go wrong, I guess. So yeah, we do generally prefer to look for quality and scarcity value, but sometimes the budget dictates otherwise.
Yeah. And so when talk us through a bit of the technology side of things. So you've got a prospective buyer and you've qualified them. How does the magic and the matchmaking work from then on?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the reality is at this stage we haven't done huge volume. So a lot of what we can do, for example, I know at the moment if I get an inquiry for Melbourne, I know that if the budget's $1 million and they want to buy around Coburg or Brunswick, I know that Michael Ramsey on our panel, he's the guy. He's covered those areas for 20 years. If we've got a first time buyer wants to buy in Melbourne, Catherine Cashboard specializes in a lot of those types of transactions. But we
Mm,
do have, and this is one of the things we're working on the tech side of things, and some artificial intelligence and machine learning that helps us to um, allocate clients to the right buyer's agent
mm,
automatically. So that will become more important as we grow the volume. But there's other tech that we're building as well in terms of we have a buyer's agent portal because I think the world is moving away from physically signed contracts. We'll be moving towards digital signatures. So everything that we can automate and make digital, we are doing in terms of the signing up of clients, the invoicing, the signing of purchase
mm,
authorities, and ultimately contracts as well. So I think it is a bit of a work in progress because at the moment we we can quite comfortably handle the volumes that we're driving through, but we're dialing up our marketing expenditure now into the hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, and therefore, yeah, we expect the volume is going to go between now and Christmas. We'll see a very sharp uplift in transactions, and that's where the automation becomes more important.
yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of, I mean, the types of buyers you're attracting, because I mean, I guess you'd have first home buyers, and then there's some niche type of buyers as well. So I know a few buyers agents that will focus on, say, the medical profession, things like that. Is and Now I'm talking from the aspect of the buyer's agent going, how can buyers help me? If I'm looking for clients in that medical space, do you have specific type of marketing that's targeted towards um, a different demographics and target audience?
Yeah, we definitely do. So I think, yeah, as I mentioned, about 3% of transactions go through buyers agents at the moment.
Mm,
I mean, that's compared to, in the US, it might be about half of transactions. If you look at the latest NAR report, now that might not all be full end-to-end service, but
mm,
most buyers are using an agent in some capacity. So our vision is to grow that share from around 3% to ideally say 10% of transactions over the coming years.
yep.
At the moment, we're getting a lot of first home buyers and investors. It's probably our most two popular cohorts. So the marketing at the moment is to some degree going to be targeted in those areas
Hmm.
because it's the low hanging fruit, I guess. Investors tend to be familiar with what buyers agents do, and they tend to see the value in what a buyer's agent can do. Also, the agents on our panel, they like to work with investors because it's a less emotive transaction and
Mm,
it's more based on the numbers and getting the best return on investment. So I think in the first instance, we'll focus the marketing there. But if we're going to grow the market share from say 3% to 10, or ideally even higher, then we will need to capture more home buyers, downsizers, upgraders. So we'll definitely be
yes,
looking to branch out in that direction over time.
fantastic. And it's oh, I have little people coming in. Look.
Welcome.
He's not here to help. He's not here to help, obviously. So in terms of, you've got qualification process for your buyers, and it's disco in here. And what's your qualification process for the buyer's agents?
Yeah, it's not actually. We haven't sort of got a definitive list. I mean, I guess what we really like to look for is credibility, track record, and I think in this day and age, I think if you under delivered to clients, you would find out about it very quickly on chat forums and elsewhere. So obviously, our reputation we see as being of utmost importance. So there's a few qualifications in terms of only working with buyers agents with a strong track record, and also people who only work in the best interest of the buyer. Now, I guess as we grow, this is one of the things we'll need to monitor. So one of the things we do when a client is finished on a transaction, they give us some feedback on the experience. It's effectively
Mm,
like a star rating
yeah.
system. Now, if we're scoring 5 stars and 4 stars, then fantastic. If we're getting twos and threes, obviously we'll need to look at why that's happened. Thankfully, to date, our clients have all been very happy. But so, yeah, there's no sort of specific criteria for agents who want to be on our panel, but we do sort of monitor the feedback of customers over time. And we obviously want to be known as a highly reputable and creditable or credible business. So we do monitor the feedback on each transaction.
Yeah, fantastic. And so then do the agents operate under the buyer's brand, or they still operate under their own brands?
Yeah, under their own brand. So it's very similar in some ways to the aggregator model that we've
Mm,
already seen. And I think if you think back to 1990, only about 5% of transactions went through mortgage brokers. Most people just went to banks direct. But
mm,
as the mortgage aggregators like Aussie Home Loans came along, brokers just they grew that with the internet as well, of course. And now it's about 60 to 65% of transactions will go through a broker.
yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of our vision. Now, buyers agents can still, to a large degree, just function exactly as they normally do. We sort of bring them the leads that are ready to buy, but most of the day-to-day work is exactly the same. And
Mm,
agents who like to prepare a report on a property for a client, they can do all of that under their own branding and banner. It's largely the engagements, the invoicing, and the collection that falls under our remit.
Excellent. So what can we be expecting over the next few months? I know you've got a whole lot of funding that's come through. What can we be expecting in the media to be able to see, and the volumes you're expecting to come through?
Yeah, so we're just currently working with a marketing agency just to streamline our branding and our website. I think the website that we put up for our first year was largely a placeholder because it had to explain to people who we are and what we
Mm,
do. Our
mm,
new website, which goes live actually next week, will be much more focused on the consumer and customer journey, just to streamline that process.
yeah.
And in terms of media presence, we did do a fair amount of stuff. We've been on all the major television channels, 7, 9, 10, done SBS News, Fin Review Australian, but obviously capital raising is a very time consuming process and it took us a
Mm,
number of
mm,
months to go through that. But we will start from effectively from over the next week or two, we'll start to ramp up our media presence again. We put out multiple media releases per week. So you'll start to see us popping up. We do a weekly news slot on Ausbiz TV, which is Koshi's channel as well. So yeah, you'll
great.
see us around the traps, and also particularly we'll be ramping up our digital marketing campaign literally from next week. So you'll probably see a few banner ads around the place as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, and that's also being overseen by a marketing agency that works with a lot of the top brands around Australia. So we expect the volumes will grow quite rapidly. I think our next milestone in terms of fee revenue, well, I guess we want to get to $1 million in a month. That is our next major milestone.
Hmm.
Obviously, in the early months, it was getting to $100,000 of fee income in a month, which we ticked off pretty quickly. But if we want to scale, then over the next 6, 12 months, we want to be hitting those seven-figure numbers.
Absolutely fantastic, exciting stuff, Pete. And I'm sure it is going to be highly welcome because I've seen a lot more. I said a lot more buyers agents coming into the market, and because we actually service quite a few buyers agents at the Growth Hub with our outsourcing services, and often they're like, well, the ones that are doing quite well, they said, Not a problem. A lot of them are from referrals, but we need to be able to get to the next level where we've got to do some marketing and we want to have a consistent flow of leads. Luke's asked, apologies if you've covered this, but do you find development sites as well?
No, we can do. Yeah, so and we do it in the same way. We use buyers agents who specialise in doing that. So if we've got a client who wants to buy a development site, then we allocate them to the right person on our panel. Depends on the location who the right buyers
Mm,
agent is. But yeah,
mm,
we also buy commercial property. We bought commercial property in Sydney up to the value of 4 or 5 million. So we've done a range of different stuff. And I guess that is the beauty of the aggregator model. You know, we can find people who specialize in all areas and allocate the work to them accordingly.
yeah, because it's a similar thing like how you would deal with mortgage brokers that you'll have access to, well, the mortgage broker might have access to 50 lenders. You're the central point where you're saying these are my needs. Who's the best buyer's agent to be able to service me for that?
Yeah, and one of the things that we're doing that's a bit different. Now, I think back to when I started out as a buyer's agent, and the focus was always on the next fee, you know, generating a profit on the next transaction, the next transaction.
Mm,
Now,
mm,
it's a different model. We're effectively investing $2.5 million in marketing and growth over the next 2 years, but it's not. The focus is not on profit for us. It's entirely volume.
volume.
Is our strategy for the next year or two. And
Yeah.
once we grow volume, we can go back, raise further capital, and dial up the expenditure further. So we're not focusing on eking out a profit on every transaction. Quite the opposite. We're just
Mm,
focusing on growing the volume as much as we can, because then it will be a win-win across the industry. You know, we'll get volume and traction, which helps us to raise more capital from investors. Buyers
mhm,
agents will get more pre-approved leads, so there'll be more work in the industry. So yeah, I think yeah, when we started out, yeah, we got some sort of mixed feedback from the industry, but yeah, I think think people are starting to see that our vision is not to disrupt the industry in a negative way. It's actually to
Mm.
grow the awareness and grow the number of transactions. So if there's a bigger pie, there'll be more work there for everybody.
Absolutely, and if you've got that abundant mindset, it's a win-win for everyone.
You articulated it much better than I can, Cheryl.
Oh, good. Well, Pete, exciting times. All the best. Obviously, congratulations on the capital raising. That's a hefty amount, which I'm sure will go into good use. Anyone that's interested, either as a buyer looking for um, a specific sort of buyer's agent, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Two ways. You can just contact us via the website, which is buyersbuyers.com.au, or if you want to drop me an email, pete.wargent at buyersbuyers.com.au. But I'm quite present across most media channels like Twitter and Facebook, so I'm pretty easy to find generally.
Excellent. LinkedIn as well. Don't forget LinkedIn. And if you're a buyer's agent that's interested to find out about how you can generate more leads with buyers, similar sort of contact details, pete.wargent at buyersbuyers.com.au. Awesome. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, if you've got any particular questions about how it all works, I think get in contact with Pete. He's around LinkedIn. Um, Andre says thank you. Thanks, Pete. Luke says thank you as well. So anyone that's out there, particularly that you're starting up in your agency, or you're just wanting a consistent level of not thinking it's going to be a big drive to marketing. And so, if marketing's not your thing, and you're spending a lot of time trying to qualify your buyers, and that's wasting quite a bit of your time. There is a better way. So, thank you. You take care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of your day because you're just starting off your day. And everyone else, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time. If you're wanting any support in your buyer's agency in terms of administration, operations, research, shortlisting, just hit us up at the Growth Hub. We know our buyer's agents really, really well, and we'd love to be able to help see you grow as well. So take care. Have a great evening. Ciao, ciao. Bye bye.